Hey everyone. So today we're going to talk turbos, and as you can see I've got a 1025 2018 model here on the right and a 1023. This is a 2014 model. And what we're going to talk about just at a high level are the differences in a 1025 and a 1023. Now keep in mind the 1025, the 1026, the 2025 second gen, they're all going to be the same. So if I'm talking about this tractor, the 1025, and you have a 2025, that's what applies to you. 1023 will be here obviously, but the key to this one is it is a 2014 model. So if you have a 1026, everything engine-wise is going to be applicable on this side, but what you're going to find in the engine bay, like how your hood works, this little contraption here we'll talk about in just a bit, that's going to be from this tractor, because the different model years, and I say 1026 because I can be assured, I think 1026s started in 2011 and finished basically in 2013 maybe 2012. I think the timeline is 2011 is the 1026's debut, 2010 would have been a 2305, sorry, I'm slow here this morning. And then in 2013, the 1023 debuted, and then the 2014, I think, the 1025 or 1026 became the 1025. No material differences, honestly. I mean, there was some change in the engine for Tier 4 final, but as far as end user is concerned, it's basically the same. So let's get into a little bit of what the differences are. We'll start with the differences between the 1025 and the 1023, and then we're gonna, I think, segue to the differences in the later versions. This is 2015 and later, which is 2018, and 2014 and before. Because the 2014 and before are going to be chassis differences. 2015 and later is going to be, well, the difference between them would be chassis differences, and then 1023 and 1025 are going to be engine differences. Okay, and I probably should just get this out of the way real quick. One of the upgrades that will be available is this competition stainless steel exhaust header. Now, everybody's going to ask, can I just get this? This is what I'm going to run. I'm not going to run the DPF. That's up to you, but this is going to be an add-on. So you will be able to get it, but when you buy the standard kit, and I've got to update my website, it's been wrong for quite some time, you're going to get this exhaust assembly. It's going to have a test canister, what I call a test canister or bypass, which is like this, where it's just completely empty. And then it will have a DPF, which is treated with precious metals and lowers your NOx and particulate matter emissions. So you'll have both of those as options. And what you decide to run is up to you. If you decide to run the DPF, you're going to get no change in performance. It's basically the same, and you are going to get a quieter machine and a cleaner machine without question. If you decide to run the open canister, if you're testing or if that's just what you decide to run, you know, one thing that I haven't addressed, and this isn't going to change what I'm talking about here, but if you did have a 1026, that is a pre-Tier 4 machine. And so you were technically grandfathered in of having to use or having to meet the emissions. Of course, we are in a bit of a gray area on whether or not you have to use the DPF. I run it both ways. I do like the DPF because really HydrosPlus, one of the main things that started HydrosPlus is the fact that the machine was too loud in my opinion. So having to run up into higher RPMs meant it was even louder. And so I like things quiet. So often I do run the DPF, but I also run it with a bypass on occasion, and now we're seeing, you'll be seeing me run this on occasion as well. So the reason I end up running this over the DPF honestly just comes down to the fact that you can hear the turbo better with the straight pipe or the empty can than you can with the DPF. And as stupid as it might sound, one of the big reasons I like a turbo is it just sounds cooler. I love it. I'd like to start it and hear it run, and engines are fun to me. That's one of the things I like in this world. And so hearing the whir of a turbo makes me happy. So that's often why I end up running the empty can versus the DPF. And this, I hesitate to say this only because I'm not 100% on it. Somebody is going to mention in the comments, and please still mention it if you're interested, but now that we have the ability to make these in-house, the next step would be a stack, right? And I have a prototype stack that I've made, and obviously it doesn't go through the hood, comes down and then back up, but it's just a lot of material, and we're gonna have to connect it in some way to the engine, basically, because there's too much flop in it. And so that's something that's pretty far down the road. And if you buy this, and I don't have pricing and details on it yet, I'm gonna make it as cost effective as possible. If you buy this and then you end up buying the stack, I'm gonna give you credit towards that. So I don't hesitate to buy this because you're waiting on the stack. If you buy them both, it's gonna work out. Just trust me on that. But at the same time, as much as I would like this, or I like this, I can obviously get it. The setup that you receive functionally is gonna be the same. So do you really need this? Not necessarily. And you might hear, I'm not gonna say you can hear the turbo whirl just a little bit more with this. It does seem like it to me, but that could be in my head. So anyhow, if there is a stack and you bought this, you're gonna get basically that money back towards the stack. The stack's gonna be a lot more material, probably gonna have multiple pieces, and that's why I'm not ready to commit on just how long it's gonna take to get that and get it right. All right, so enough of that. Let's get into the differences. Let's start with 1025 versus 1023, and then we're gonna go 2015 and later, maybe 2016 and later, and pre-2014 and before. I'm not sure where the cutoff is for the changes, but you'll get that. You'll know which one you have. So first of all, let's talk about 1025. Where does the intake come out? 1025, it's on the top. You see here? And you'll notice there's a spot here. This is because, like most manufacturers, Yanmar, they're using some of the common castings and then they're modifying them for use in a specific application. But on this one, you don't see the one in the top because that would have been put on this removable plate. You can see where they also have holes for holding the air cleaner, which we decided is a bad idea. But this is a different charge tube on the 1023. And one other thing to note, when you get the 1023 kit, you will only get clamps for this here against the turbo, one here, and the other one, the two on the turbo and the one to the intake. This one here, you're gonna reuse the worm gear clamp because there's not enough room between the injector feed lines to get this type of clamp in. This will work just fine, and honestly, it would work fine in all these spots, maybe except for this one, but it just looks cooler to have these, and they do work a little better. So that's the number one difference. Since we're at the top here, we actually have bigger clamps here. I forgot the name of these clamps. The other ones are V-band clamps, but this is just a different clamp style that's a little bit more effective. The second thing you're going to notice is here, you can see how this is kind of cinched down, and this is the reason to have a clamp like this. On the 1023, this intake or inlet here from the air filter is smaller, but we're using the same tube. It just didn't make sense to make a specific tube for this air cleaner. If it's something that really bothers you, there's a couple of options. You can take your old tube, cut a piece of the rubber, and you can make a bit of a, well, first option is always do nothing, right? Put this on, tighten it down, it's gonna seal just fine. It's a big fat clamp. This is silicone. It'll make a great seal. But if that's something that you don't prefer, you can put a buffer in here with your existing tube, cut it off, put it inside, and then it'll be a little bit tighter there. And you could also go ahead and grab the 1025 air filter element that actually mounts right here as well. And it's gonna have this bigger inlet. So there's three options if it's something that really bugs you, but really you don't need to do anything. This is gonna work just fine. And this isn't pressurized, of course, it's drawing air in. So if the seal does not have to be as tight as it would have to be for something like the charge tube, right? So that's another difference. Let's see here, on the exhaust side, the only thing I would call out as a slight difference here is this engine is different. This is a 0.9 liter engine. I think it's 0.9 or 1 liter engine, where this one is a 1.3. So it's a different block and head and everything, but same basic principle. But you do get a little closer to the alternator here. Now, I haven't run into any issues. I haven't had anybody report any issues, but it's just a call out. If we do end up having issues or enough people mention it, over time, maybe this is a little bit too close, we can get some heat shielding, and some people are already gonna do that. A lot of the customers I have lots of experience with turbos on different applications, semis and race cars and things like that, so they're already kind of doing the things that they know that have caused them some grief in the past, but so far I haven't seen or have anything reported on, that being kind of tight on the alternator. A little more tight than what you see here on this one. Well, I don't have the same, sorry, I forgot. But this, for whatever reason, is just a little bit further away, and so we don't have that challenge. All right, so back to the 1023. Everything else here, the same setup. The charge tube is different, as I mentioned. And we do drain the oil from, so the feed line is the same general location. Now you do have your, at least on this 2014 model, the oil dipstick is back here on the 1025. It's up in this area closer to the front, so it's not as close to this, but it's not really a problem. You have your feed line that comes up. We have the same crankcase vent, but one difference is you're gonna get a different, I don't call this a cap, or we call it oil drain cap here, but I don't know what makes sense for you, but there's a different style cap. It's more like what you would see actually on a lawnmower. And so we have a different fitting here, and then we have this 45 degree. So as you can see, it kind of bends up and goes to the top there into the same location as on the 1025. So that is the major differences, and I'll just go back to here. On this one, now this is different on this tractor than what some of the earlier models had, and functionally it's the same, but what we've done is rather than come down into an elbow fitting and then into a cap, we've machined the fitting into the cap. So it's just one piece here, and now we have an elbow that comes up. So this drains down and goes into the crankcase. Previously, it would drain down to a straight fitting. There was an elbow, low profile elbow here, and then a cap. So that's one of the upgrades that I was gonna mention. But that's why if you're looking at this and that doesn't look like what you have, that's the reason. It's just been changed a little bit. That's more efficient. That fitting actually was quite expensive. So machining it directly into the cap made financial sense, keeps the cost low. All right, let's shift gears and talk about what are the issues we're seeing with the turbo from an install perspective. Now, for somebody like me who's been trained in the corporate world for a couple of decades, saying the word issue is kind of a no-no, right? We want to spin it around to say, here are some exceptions, or here are things that, how do we soften this? But I'm not going to BS you guys from an install perspective. But to be clear, and I will talk about, we have had just a few, a handful probably, maybe not even a full handful of situations where turbos had issues, and they were all from the get-go. And so I'll talk about that, but what I want to hone in on here are issues with kind of the overall kit, and after people run them for a while, what have we seen that have emerged as problems? And really it's all limited to two things. One, it is brackets, and I had a lot of feedback early on, and I didn't disagree with it really at the time, but I felt like we had to go through and test it just a bit on the size of the brackets and kind of what that approach was. And then the other thing is really bolts coming loose. And I don't think this is any fault of any of the people who installed them. Maybe there was a few people, I've been guilty, honestly, of not tightening something or forgetting one bolt. And what you find that happens is, say for example, you've got 4 bolts down here that holds this riser, 3 bolts here. What happens is you tighten 3 and you forgot the one in the back because the wrench you had didn't quite fit it. You were going to go get an extension, then you saw a butterfly and you never came back, right? Well, leaving one bolt loose really makes it so that the others can loosen up pretty easily. And when that happens, it actually doesn't cause any damage. It's just you're going to start to hear some rattling, right? And you come out and you're like, what's going on here? And you'll find out that that bolt was loose, or maybe you didn't get these as tight as you should have, and they loosened up. So really the best practice, and I didn't say this early on, is run it for 30 minutes or an hour, get it through a heat cycle or 2, and then come back and just make sure that these are indeed tight. If you do that, you can see these are probably not going anywhere. Now this particular turbo has been sitting outside for a bit, so that's why it is with the hood up. Not a good idea probably, but I'm running out of room for tractors. This one's just been installed, so this one looks like brand new. It's not going to look like that after a while, but it's also not going to look like that. So don't feel like, well, I guess it could, depends on how you store it, but for the most part, they won't look like that. They're going to look more like this probably, and so not so much surface rust like mine has. But that doesn't hurt anything. It's cast iron. Not going to be a problem. But anyway, bolts loosening and brackets breaking are probably, well, by and large, that is the only issues that we've had. We've had a few others I'll mention here in just a minute, but let's focus on the bracketry and how we've changed it. Now, I've got some examples here, and I went ahead and just put this one on because it had the old style, and I'm showing this old style here. This is the old style, and the idea with this is I wanted to make it, it's stainless steel, and I wanted to make it such that whenever you get it, you'd be surprised at just how much variance can get you off the bolt holes here. So my thought was, if we make it not so heavy, you can manipulate it just a bit. And it's not unusual if you've bought aftermarket parts for trucks or cars and other things, and if they're made of metal, things happen in shipping, things get moved. You have to, massage them sometimes when they get there. We're trying to avoid that as much as possible, but that's what could have happened with this one. Now with the new version, and this isn't the final new version, the final new version actually doesn't have this bend in it because I kind of determined that creates a weak point that it could potentially break. Now, one this size probably isn't going to break, but when we had this bend, that was a weak point. So we put a heftier bracket here, and we've also made the hole bigger. So since you're not going to be able to bend this bracket, we ended up having to make the hole bigger. We'll send washers. Now you'll use your existing bolts, but we send washers for the variance here. And this is generally enough for it to be able to fit no matter what. I left this bolt out intentionally so you could kind of see how big this is, and then this is it with the washer. Now, when I say, you know, if I'm sitting armchair quarterback here and I'm watching this video, I'm thinking, look, there's not that much variance in these components, like a 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch. And a 1/4 inch is actually quite a lot, but what ultimately ends up happening is not just the factory machine. You've got this casting, you've got this here, as it comes up, all this comes together. There's these little variances, and if they all line up going in the same direction, you can be easily a 1/4 inch off. Probably not a whole lot more than that, because the variances are, much smaller, 1/16 of an inch and things like that, but they all lean one way, and you'll end up finding yourself where you can't put the bolt in. Now with this larger hole, you should always be able to put it in, but there might be some, like I'll just, here, you might have to kind of bend this down just a bit to meet this, or maybe bend it up just a bit. That's something that you can bend without too much effort. It's just this direction, you're not bending it. This is the old style, and you can kind of see this is like a flunky here, so it really doesn't fit at all. Well, I say doesn't fit at all. It's all the way to the top here. Usually we try to aim for having it where it's gonna kind of hit the middle of this, but that's kind of the variance also. And you do see some difference between the 1023 and the 1025 as far as, I'll show you here. Even though this really is kind of the same location, you can kind of see this one's at the bottom of it. But same kind of thing. We've made a bigger hole even in this bracket and give you some variance so that regardless of kind of how you're set up, you should be able to make the hole. And this one doesn't have the washer on it because it's the old style, but with the newer style, you'll have the washer. So again, pretty much all the issues, the other would be outliers when it comes to, and it's not that many, but 98% of any issues we've had has probably been with the exhaust. And what ended up happening, and if this has happened to yours, and it may have happened to yours, and if you've welded it back, I apologize for you having to do the extra work. If you need something from me, let me know, because you've done something that should have. It is a warranty issue. I consider it a warranty issue regardless of what happened. Even if you left the bolts off, and this happens, say you left bolts loose, and because the bolts loose, it moved more, which broke the brackets and whatever. I'm not getting into the minutia of that. If your brackets broke, let me know, and if you didn't weld them back or whatever, I will send you updated brackets. And also, if you have the older style brackets and you're worried that they're going to break, just let me know. I'll take care of it. I don't want you out there. I don't ever want anybody, especially me, to be the reason that anybody has lost use of their tractor, even if it's for a day or two. So, it's actually better for me, to be honest with you, if you mention it. If things look like, check them. Now that we're talking about this, check them if it looks like they're getting weak. Let me know. We'll get some new ones, and then I can send it via ground, because if it breaks, I'm going to overnight it to you, and obviously that's going to cost me more. So I'll be happy to send it to you if you've got the old style and you feel like you want to upgrade. So let me know on that. But between the bolts coming loose, which can put extra stress on the brackets causing a break, or just the brackets ended up breaking from vibration, whatever it is, that's really all of our issues. There were, like I said, I think I said this earlier, less than a handful where I'm going to show you another updated part. So originally we started with a piece similar to this that had the proper threads here and here so that you could put your oil. Let me show you where this is, right here. So originally your oil sending unit or pressure sending unit is in the side of the block. We take it out, we put this T in, and we put the sending unit here, and then we add our oil supply line here. Originally, this was this piece, and it had a female threaded on the end here, and then we put another fitting in, and then we put the oil supply line like you just saw. Then we moved to a piece that was like this that had a insert that we could put in, because the original thought was, you know, would we need a 1 millimeter hole, a 1.5, a 2, what is it? And we weren't 100% sure. All the research said that most people are using about a 1 millimeter hole, and pretty much everybody who's adding a turbo aftermarket, because OEM turbos have this already corrected within the componentry, but this is something when you pick up some oil supply from another location, you're going to need to constrain it. Otherwise, you're going to be burning a lot more oil than you have to. So again, we had an insert in here that was threaded in, and now this is the latest version where we have done enough hours on this so we feel confident that this is the right hole size. And if you decided you want a little more than that, you can certainly just drill this out. This is stainless steel, but you can drill that out if you feel like you need more flow. And we don't really need to mess with exchangeable orifices here, because nobody's really going to change it anyway, and this is going to be a little more reliable. So through the course of inserting those orifices and Loctiting them in, either there were maybe a couple, again, I don't even think it was 5, but there were a few that the insert actually wasn't drilled all the way through, didn't get caught here, didn't get caught at the customer, and basically within 20 minutes, you know, you see guys, if you go out to YouTube, you'll see guys run a turbo without an oil supply, but you can't do that long term. Otherwise, you know, things are going to stop in there. So there was either a situation where there was some Loctite inside the hole that basically plugged it up, or there was a situation where the hole wasn't drilled all the way through. In this case, obviously, we've added that to our procedures and looking at this and making sure that there is a hole all the way through it. And you know, we haven't had that problem since, but we had just a few within like a week, and from there we were able to resolve the issue. But we did have to ship a few extra turbos. Customers were very gracious in replacing them, you know, because that's extra work for you, and that's really not what we're about. We want you to be able to put it on, set it, and forget it, like Ron Popeil would say. But they didn't get to do that on those few. Other than that, we've had, as far as I know, we've had one other turbo failure that wasn't that was undetermined, but it sounded like it was probably some type of similar situation where oil did not get to the turbo, at least over time, and it ended up stopping the turbo. But you know, that's going to happen. You sell enough of anything, and you're going to have probably some issues. But so far, it's just been very few, which is really good, obviously. So if your question is, you know, I did have somebody ask me recently, you know, have you had anybody report any engine issues? And the answer is no. I do have people call me on a regular basis to tell me how awesome the turbo is, and I really appreciate that. It makes me feel good. And also it's good feedback so that I know kind of what's happening. The guys running snow blowers, they love it. Because that's really, if you think about these tractors, people do mow with them, but you have a better way of controlling your grass and how often you mow versus snow blowing. You know, if you get 3 feet of snow over the course of a day, you're just going to have to, you know, plow through it. And the guys running snow blowers really get probably the biggest benefit out of the turbo as anybody. Not that there isn't benefits to be had for others, but that's the ones that you know, make a lot of sense. The other one that I've heard, and I need to get one of these, but I have a customer that's got a lot of cool toys, and he has basically a turbine type blower. It looks like a jet engine, but it goes on the PTO. And he mentioned, like, before you couldn't even get it up to speed, and now with the turbo, almost effortlessly, it runs at, you know, 540 RPMs at the rear, and you know, it doesn't even feel like it's bogging down. So that's a cool application. I really need one of those blowers, but I don't have one yet. They're not cheap for sure, but really cool. But yeah, that's kind of it for, I'll say issues, because that's very, really the only thing you got to do on occasion is, you know, ship somebody an updated piece for the exhaust assembly. Oh, last one. We did have a few of the exhausts break here, just a couple, I think. And I've not seen that. I've not had that happen to mine. I have had my brackets break, but it was my fault in this case. Not to say that if they break, they're your fault, but in my case, I did know it was my fault. But we had a couple break here. Same type of thing. We're working out, you know, what is the best solution for the exhaust assembly. And now I think we've got it licked at this point. But just rest assured, if you do have an issue, we're going to take care of you. All right, last thing I think I said I was going to do is talk about the differences between 2014 and before, maybe 2015-ish, and then the later models. And the main difference that you're going to have to deal with, and I don't have it here, and I looked for it, but I don't have it. Right here is, you see a hole, but they actually have another piece here that kind of puts it's a container that goes in that hole. And there I think is one screw right down there that you take that out and you can slide that out. And you're going to need to slide it out, or you could cut it if you want. But I'm told the best I can come up with is this was to hold the owner's manual. It's in here in the engine bay, and it was to hold the owner's manual. It's going to be out of the weather, and that's where you would put it versus, you know, a lot of places, a lot of machines might have it on the back of a seat or something like that, or a canister hooked to the machine. But that's what, it was to hold the owner's manual. That's best I can come up with, but it does kind of get in the way of here. So that can be a problem, so you'll either have to trim it or take it out, I think. I don't think you can get it in without. So on this machine, you do not see that. It's no longer there, so that's one main difference. The other main difference is, I'll stay over here, you see how this hood is just one piece and it doesn't have any, it does have lateral bracing, I guess, but it's kind of back that way and out of the way. On this machine, actually I guess it has the same type of thing, but you've got this brace here. Now, can you see that? Is the lighting good enough? You don't need to do anything. It might be touching here, you can kind of see that. If you don't want to do anything, don't do anything. Let it touch here. If you start to see this wear, let me know, I'll get you a new one. If, and I don't think it's going to be, it's very slightly touching it, and you can kind of push this down just a bit so that it touches it less. I think you can just take this off, and I say it that way because this hood is virtually the same, as you can see. Same kind of, I don't think they redesigned the hood at all. They just initially, just like everything else in the world, right? They put that bracing there because they felt like that was extra insurance or whatever. And then the accountant came along and said, how can we knock a nickel out of this thing? And the engineers go, I guess we could take the hood brace off. I think we need it, but maybe we don't. I don't know. Whatever. Take it out. We don't need it. Turns out we don't need it. I mean, sometimes the accountants are right. If you're an accountant, sorry. That's your job. I mean, you're doing your job. Brace here, engineer, thought it would be a good idea. But sometimes things are over-engineered, don't get me wrong. But if I look at this, you know, pretty tough here. It seems jankier, but that's not fair because this one has gas shocks and this one has no gas shocks. It has this mechanism here. So that's another difference. Other than that, that's really the only differences that you have to deal with, as far as I'm remembering. Sorry, let me think. Yeah, that's it. So pretty straightforward. So the bigger differences is between 1023 and 1025. And I actually went and grabbed this. I didn't show this earlier, but this is the 1023. And then the latest 1025 is this one with the end machined into it. So that's it for our turbo comparison walkthrough and the introduction of the new competition pipe. And this, depending on exactly when you're watching this, it may not quite be out on the website, but should be out very soon. If you're watching this in the future, it's definitely out there. Go grab one if that's something you're interested in. There will be also, for people buying this who don't already have the turbo, you're gonna have that option to add it in the cart when you're buying your turbo, so you do it at the same time. So, but that's it. That's minor differences. You know, talking a little bit about some, what I consider very minor issues, but I do apologize for anybody who has had an issue and had to get a new part. It's not my intent, of course, but we do have to make sure, like I can't put like a 1/4-inch angle iron as my brackets. We gotta kind of walk into those to make sure that we're getting just the right fit. But other than that, everything's been going really well. Well, that's it for this video, our comparison, old versus newer. This is not really new. 2018 is, gosh, 6 years ago now, 7, 6, somewhere in there. But as we mentioned, if you've made it this far, very minor differences in the two machines, even as many years have passed. All the way from 2011. Like this machine is a 2014, but 2011 all the way to 2025, the differences, there are no material, well, it's 2024, because I don't know the 2025, but there are not material differences between those machines. And if you're, you know, thinking about getting a new machine, I would say don't. I mean, if you're trying to upgrade to the same machine, because this isn't part of my turbo spiel, but like this knob here looks like that on the 2014 and older. Oh, you got a new one for the later models. But engine, same. Functionality, completely the same. Now, if you do want a single point connection, actually you can add that later, so I would say that's not a good reason. But if you do want to add a backhoe, that's one that's tricky. Those things are expensive. If you can find one used and you can put it on, maybe. But that's the reason I would upgrade. If I was trying to get another machine and I needed, if I didn't have the loader, well, no, you could add a loader, backhoe. That's probably it. I would limit it to that if I were going to upgrade. If I were not trying to add a backhoe and I've got an older machine, I'd keep it. Because the amount they want for it today versus when you bought it, it's going to be a whole lot more. And you're really getting the same machine. It really is the same. And that's a good thing, I think. Okay, I think we've covered everything we said we were going to cover. New versus old, 1025, 1026, 2025R versus 1023. And one thing I just thought of is the 1026 actually still lives. It's just not in the US. I'm talking from a US point of view. In Europe, there is a 1026R. So you can have a more modern, I think I may have mentioned earlier that the 1026 is 2011 to 2013-ish, somewhere like that. But actually in Europe, it's 2025. I'm sure they have a 2025. Oh, I didn't think about that. You're gonna have a 2025, 2025R. That's gonna be confusing. But I think we covered everything. New items here. Oh, one other new item, just now realized. This is a banjo fitting that goes into the hose. If you have the earlier models, you had a banjo fitting that went in, that had a fitting on it, and then the hose was a straight fitting. This is a little more compact, and the reason we did it is get a little more clearance here as we go under and back to the oil drain tee. Now, one thing, if you're really particular and you want to go this route, some people have, is you can actually, I don't know that the hose that I provide, well, I do know, is not long enough, but people have gotten hose and come around this way. It might be better. I don't know that it's better, but it, you know, if this, in this case, we're barely not touching, but even if that were touching, that's not really going to be an issue for any, maybe over time, but then you've got to worry about other things kind of wearing out before that little piece is going to have any issues. That's my point of view, but we'll see. I could be wrong about that. But that's it for this video. If you're interested in a turbo or anything else we have available, hydraulics, quick couplers, coolers, all kinds of fun stuff, it's at hydrosplus.com. If you have questions, feel free to give me a call. The number's on the website. You can email me. I'm just going to be honest, I'm not the best at returning emails in a timely fashion, and some I know have slipped through the cracks, so apologies if that has happened to you. Pick up the phone, and I will be happy to talk to you. But other than that, questions, comments, you can leave them below, and thanks for watching.